So we're back again, and of course we're talking about Trump's amazing way that he brought about this ceasefire and finally peace between Iran and Israel, and saved the world from the terrorist Iranians who were planning on using their intercontinental ballistic missiles, which they don't have, to attack the United States and the rest of the world. Which is a ludicrous proposition if you stop and think about it. Because what are they going to? They're going to start a nuclear war with the United States. They're going to send a nuclear bomb over to someplace in Texas, and turn all that desert into sand. At which point in time they'd be hit with 1,000 American nukes, turning that entire country into a plain of glass. It's ridiculous. These people were not a threat to anybody except Israel. And don't forget, folks, Israel has a bomb and a delivery system that they got from us, and they've had it for decades. So Iran, being Israel's bitter enemy, and that's a whole issue by itself, but they said, well, we have to have a nuclear bomb so we can checkmate Israel's nuclear bomb or bombs. It's the only way we can ever, comfortably go to war with Israel and not worry about Israel nuking us. That's a rational position to take. It's not a bunch of terrorists saying, let's get a bomb so we can go terrorize the world. There's nothing, and I don't care a damn how people want to slander this Iranian government, and I don't like these mullahs at all. I can't stand them because of what they do to their own people, which is what happens when religious fanatics, aka, some of the Christian fundamentalists in this country, take over a government, because then they're blinded. They think the only good people are the people who have their religious beliefs and everybody else is a bad person. Somebody like that running the government, horrible. And that's what's going on in Iran right now. But as far as Iran being involved in this Machiavellian scheme to develop nuclear weapons, for what end? For what end? They couldn't use them except against Israel. So let's stop this business about they're a terrorist country. You want a terrorist country to get an atom bomb so they can terrorize the world? That's the kind of full-blown nonsensical rhetoric that we heard from the George Bush Jr. administration when he was trying to successfully talk us into going into a land war against Iraq to seize their nuclear weapons, which they didn't have, seek their nuclear weapons plants that they didn't have, seek their biological weapons plants that they didn't have. The whole thing was a crock. And we paid dearly for it, the longest war in American history. And now we got Trump out here spreading this crap, and it's always slogans. These MAGA people don't do anything. Their entire vocabulary consists of a list of slogans and platitudes. And you get them when they're fierce debates, and what they say, you liberals, you get your news from CNN. That's what they consider reasoned dialogue. So I'm not a reasonable person in the sense that I don't speak calmly and dispassionately on matters about which I feel strongly. I'm very angry at the way Trump treats these immigrations, particularly the ones who are poor. They come over here with nothing. They're struggling. They have no power. They have no context. They barely speak English, and they're just trying to work. And he treats them like dirt. He's a bully. That makes me mad, and it should make fair-minded people mad. When you see people being mistreated by a bully, I don't care who it is or where it is, it should make you angry, and you should try to do something or say something to stop it. But the other thing that makes me mad is when people say ridiculous, because they're constant, and this is throughout history. Oh, they're the bad guys, they're our enemies. They're this, they're that, they're this, they're that, they're that. And all of the people say, oh, yeah, they're terrible, we hate them. And of course, the people don't know anything about these people. Who would Americans know anything about Iran? Who knows anything about Iran? I know a lot about Iran because I have a lot of Iranian friends. And they don't have any use for that government. I don't have any use for that government. It's vicious. But these people know something about what it's like to be an Iranian. Most people you talk, they don't even know an Iranian. They don't know anything about Iran. But boy, they're experts. Oh, they're a terrorist country, a terrorist nation, terrorist this, terrorist that. Now, the biggest spreader of terrorism. And the people who say that, you ask them, well, where do you get that information? Oh, well, I know. Everybody knows that. Well, everybody doesn't know it. You've got information, be able to point to a source. For example, I've been complaining bitterly about the fact that Obama had stopped that Iranian program, the enrichment program. He stopped it cold, and that it wasn't that big to begin with. He stopped it cold, and it wasn't until Trump came in during Biden they began ramping it up slightly, and Trump comes in and it goes skyrocket. Now, how do I know all this? Well, first of all, I know it because I pay attention historically to what goes on. I have a physics degree. I'm interested in that subject matter regardless, and I've been following what's been going on with Iran since the days of the Shah, when we first started helping them build a nuclear reactor so that they could use it for electricity. But I know what they're doing. But I just was watching on the Sunday talk shows, and up popped this fellow who's, I forget his official title, but he's the head of the UN monitoring program. It has been monitoring Iran's nuclear program since day one. And he had a graph. He brought the graph and he said, well, here's their program. And remember, they're not building a bomb. They've never started building a bomb. They haven't built an intercontinental ballistic missile so to carry a bomb. But what they have started doing is enriching uranium. Now, I don't want to go into what that means, but the bottom line is that the lighter uranium, the U-235, can be used to build a bomb. The heavier uranium, the U-238, can't. So you've got to... And the percentage of U-235 in uranium naturally is like 1% or something or less. So you've got to find a way to take a chunk of uranium, you turn it into a gas, and then you spin it in a centrifuge, and the heavier uranium that we don't want goes to the outside of the centrifuge. It's gas, but the heavier gas goes to the outside. The ones that you want for a nuclear reactor stay toward the center. Then they have a hose and they suck that heavier gas out of there, leaving inside the U-235, which they can then turn into they can reduce it from a gas to a solid and store it. Okay, I want to say it's cheesecake or something like that. I forget the name because I forget my own name. Who? No, me. That's his name. I forget. So, but anyway, it's I can't think of the term, but it goes from a gas to a solid, and that's what they make into a solid is the stuff that's in the middle. That's the U-235. That's the lighter uranium. There's a reason you need light versus heavier, which I don't want to go into, but it has to do with the speed with which neutrons go through the other atoms in the pile of fissionable material. So you don't need to know that. I know it because that's my field. So that's what they do. They spin that out, and then they're able to segregate the heavier, non-usable material out. And what do they do with that bottom? They suck it out with a hose, and they put it into the next centrifuge, where it gets spun again. And they have a whole series of these things. And so they take this material, and with each one, they get a little more, and a little more, and a little more, and a little more of the U-235, and then they stack it all up, and they put it in boxes, and they're close to being fuel. There is the fuel. But the percentage of the total uranium that they have, which is usable as fuel, is now up to, I think they said, around 80%. Well, that's very high. It doesn't take much to go from take that same material, put it in a gaseous form, and move and increase the percentage of the U-235 above 90%, and that you can use that not by itself. You have to still do things to it, but that is the basis for a bomb. So that's the scary part when they start doing that. That's what the centrifuge is. That's what this whole thing is about. So this fella from the UN, they've been monitoring that very carefully. And they were able to monitor it because there were teams that could go in there and look around under the Obama agreement, which once Trump pulled himself out of that, also pulled out a lot of the monitors. It was a terrible decision by Trump. Extremely dangerous. He did it because Bibi Netanyahu told him to do it, and Trump doesn't have a mind of his own. So, Bibi, yeah, he's a great guy. I like him. He supported me. So, yeah, whatever he wants. So he pulled out of that agreement. So this guy's up there, and he's got his graph. Yeah, I have a physics degree. I like graphs. So I'm looking at the graph. Over here, we have the uranium enrichment program before Obama. It was actually during Bush Jr. And Obama comes in, and it's still going up a little bit, and they negotiate the treaty, and then boom, here's the treaty date. And you know what happened to the production of material at that point? That's the 0. 2-0, ladies and gentlemen. This is right there on national television. The guy whose job it is to monitor this stuff with a graph, and there he is, shows zero, down at the absolute zero production of enriched uranium. From the time they signed that agreement until Trump pulls us out of it, at which point in time it started going up again, and then it went up gradually during Biden, and then when Trump came back in, that graph goes ping through the roof. So if Trump hadn't done that, they wouldn't have to be close to having an enrichment program today. It was dead in the water and carefully monitored. They even destroyed some of their reactors. Some of their centrifuges were destroyed. They didn't even have to do that. So that's where we were. Now, you MAGA people out there don't know this, but you can find it out if you ever bother researching anything instead of just taking whatever you hear on TV and then saying it as though it came from God to the Bible, to Donald Trump, and to you through Fox News. Do some Googling. Go look up the UN. Go look up what, the production rates during during the treaty time. Go look and see. It's all there. This is not like this is stuff where you can debate the facts. The facts are there. Clear, easy, open to anybody who is willing to look. If the facts were not as I'm telling you, then I would probably have a different position. I would have no trouble. I was glad that. I was hoping that when they drop these bombs down there, it would prevent them from further developing, because I don't think it's a good idea for any additional countries to have nuclear weapons. I don't think it's a good idea for Iran to be involved in this enrichment program, super enrichment program. That's why I supported Obama's treaty efforts to stop them, which were successful, to stop them from doing it. It's not a good idea. But for crying out loud, stop blaming Biden. Stop blaming Obama of all. You say Obama gave him the money. No, we had seized Iranian money. George Bush did that. Seized their money. It wasn't our money. It was their money. We went to it, we grabbed it out of their bank accounts, and we were holding it. And we continue to hold it for one reason: leverage to get them to stop their program. They stopped their program as part of the agreement. We were going to give them back their own money. We did. And now people are saying, oh, well, the only reason they have a nuclear program is because Obama gave them $150 billion to go build a nuclear bomb. I'm like, no, he gave them $150 million of their money to stop building a bomb. It's like, what planet do these people live in? And unfortunately, they vote. But more unfortunately, they're opinionated. They think they're right. They state their opinions with great force. They don't talk like I do about, what's in it, what's in a reactor, what's the program, what's the science, what's the technology, and what are the monitors of the UN, what do they say? I talk about facts, and they don't. They just repeat the crap that they hear, that they want to hear, and it's always, Obama was terrible, Democrats are terrible, yay, Trump, MAGA forever, he's the greatest president that ever lived. It's just nonsense. Just absolute nonsense. So now what I'm hearing, latest update, just tonight, just like this thing I told you about the UN inspector, I heard that Sunday. This is now Tuesday. So now I'm hearing that this bombs that they said, with not any evidence, I think it was Hexeth, or one of these mental midgets he has out there, said, and their enrichment program was demolished. Now they're saying, it looks as though maybe it was the worst that happened. It was to sit back a few months. That there's really no evidence that anything was demolished, and of course nobody can see underneath the ground, so we don't know what happened. But it looks like now that clearly the claims that it was an overwhelming success, stated without any evidence. Vance didn't go down in those holes. Nobody was in there looking at the plants. Nobody with knowledge of what a nuclear plant looks like was in there looking to see if any damage had been done, if so, how much. Nobody apparently, a whole bunch of this U-235 yellow cake, that's what it's called. The yellow cake was hauled out of this plant, this reactor that we just bombed. The truckloads hauling this stuff out, and we don't know where they went with it. We don't know, how far along it was, if they took it to another reactor, because you can have a centrifuge in lots of different places. So all they have to do is just, take what they have there, the 60%, and just pop it up, or 80%, I guess. They just keep popping it up and bringing it on up to 90%, and they have enough material for a bomb. Now that still leaves them far from having a bomb, and way far from having a delivery system. But it's looking now like it wasn't the terrific success that it was. You know what else wasn't a success? Donald Trump's ceasefire that he announced last night. I turned that on and I said, wow, good for him. Right? I was thinking, maybe he finally did something right. Look at what it looks like he's ended that war. This morning I turn on, and there's Donald Trump fit to be tied, and he's using the F word, and he's madder than hell at Israel, and he has to balance it by saying he's mad at Iran, but obviously he was really mad at Israel. Because there was this, before the ceasefire went into effect, they gave it 12 hours or something, so immediately Israel went out and just bombed the hell out of everything they could, because they wouldn't be able to after the ceasefire went into effect, which was, if that's true, if that's what they did, that's really disgusting, and Trump was furious about it. And I'm thinking, well, good. Finally, Trump has gotten off of his politician's ass, and he's starting to sound like a real man who really cares about the issues and is finally willing to take on Israel. Now, of course, he can stop Israel tomorrow just by cutting off their money. But at least he finally said something about it. And I got, well, good for him. And he stood up. He finally stood up for something other than just bluster and bravado. He finally looks like he did something. And then the more I listened to him and the more I thought about it, I realized he wasn't mad because Israel was killing innocent people with dropping a whole bunch of bombs. That's not why he was mad. He was mad because they made him look like an idiot. Because last night he's coming out telling the whole world how he solved this problem. He's basically brought about a ceasefire, which looks like the same thing as he was presenting as a peace treaty, ceasing hostilities between these countries. And before the ink is dry, before this thing I just heard, because I will stay up late, before it was announced to the people that he had solved this problem, all the news today is Israel immediately violated it. And it's like, and not in a small way. So that's why he was mad. He was mad because they made him look like a fool. It's always about him. And, if you think he's the greatest president that ever lived, then you obviously have never studied Kennedy, Lincoln, Clinton, Obama. These people accomplished a lot. Franklin Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, hell, even... you go back to a lot of people that people have never really heard of, like Benjamin Harrison, who was my great-grandfather's next-door neighbor and good friend. Who knows today who Benjamin Harrison was? I know because of the family connections. And if you live in Indianapolis and you're familiar with Fort Benjamin Harrison, you've heard the name. Benjamin Harrison was a better president. So Benjamin Harrison signed the antitrust? I think. No, I forget. He signed something that was of significance, and I'm trying to think of what it was right now. It's what happens when you get to be 40. Anyway, but we've had presidents that most people never heard of who were pretty good. James J. Polk. He took over all of what used to be Mexico and is now California, Texas, Arizona. Yeah, he did that. Yeah. We had George Washington quash the Whiskey Rebellion, and Thomas Jefferson. He got the Louisiana Purchase. There's just been a lot of people, and of course everybody knows Jefferson was a great man, but they don't even know that he accomplished things like taking on the Barbary pirates. That's an interesting case study. I argued that when I was in law school on the moot court team, when that was used as a justification for the Vietnam War, which it wasn't. But there were all kinds of great presidents in our history. And for people to say he's the greatest president ever, are just showing that they are once again completely ignorant, and they're in the throes of this guy. It's like a cult, and it's not a pleasant thing to hear. And I get impatient with these people. I don't dislike my friends for that. But it's frustrating to hear people I know, like, and respect who just they're not opening their eyes. Their eyes are little slants. And I try to open them just a little bit, and I get nowhere. So if you're one of those people, you're listening to me, please listen to me if you respect me. Okay, that's a pretty stupid criteria. Just listen to me so that I don't feel so bad. You're sensitive people. I'm a sensitive person. Not as sensitive as Alex Padilla was crying for himself on the floor of the Senate. Jeez. Tough guy, that Alex Padilla. Oh my goodness, they pushed me to the floor and I fell down and I was on the floor. That's the kind of leadership we really need in the Democratic Party today. Not. Anyway, that's why Trump was mad. He was mad because they made him look bad. Now, I don't know what's going to happen today. So that's the latest I've heard. Just today I heard with ceasefire, then I heard no ceasefire, then I heard Trump madder than hell, then I'm finding out that apparently we don't, the information that's starting to come back is that we didn't do any real significant damage to their program. And it's like, what? Can't we ever just do anything? If they'd kept Obama's program in effect, we wouldn't need to be worrying about whether our bombs were effective, because we had people on the ground as inspectors, the doors wide open. We would know what was going on. And like I said, the UN's confirmed it. They weren't doing anything during the period of that treaty. So that's where we are. One other thing about it, and I don't even want to go here, but are we out of time? Oh, wait a minute, I don't have a timekeeper. Bill Maher was talking about people, talking about, not Bill Maher, it was Michael Smerconish. And they were talking about, Trump saying that what great heroes these people were that flew the mission. And I'm going to say something. I don't have to take anything away from our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. I grew up in the Air Force. These were Air Force pilots that they're saying were brave heroes for this mission. And I got to tell you, they weren't. They weren't. That's not taking anything away from them. They did their job. But you know who was a hero? My dad was a hero. You know why? Because he was a bombardier navigator. He was the lead bombardier navigator leading his wing over Sicily during World War II. And every time he flew over there, a good percentage of the people in his formation were killed, blown out of the sky. I read his notes from his missions, and where he describes digging what was left of the body of his tail gunner out of that plane, his body riddled with bullets from Nazi fighters. My dad had to sit there in that tail and that little nose right there, with the machine gun in one hand and his Norden bomb sight in the other, and a pen, trying to figure out where they were going and then where to drop the bombs. All the time being riddled with machine gun bullets and planes flying right in his face, and then anti-aircraft stuff all over the place in a little tiny space. When I was 11 years old, my dad showed me his plane. It wasn't his. His plane was blown out of the air, but the same type. And he said, yeah, I was right in that bubble there. Go in and crawl in there, Ed. I was 10 years old. I could barely get in there. It was so small. And yet my dad was couldn't take his parachute. He squeezed himself in there, flew those missions. That was guts. That was courage. And I grew up with those people, these World War II pilots and bombardier navigators and crew people, machine gunners, not machine gun Joe McCarthy, the Lion senator from Wisconsin, but actual real heroes. Those were heroes. They put their lives in jeopardy. They knew that there was a better than even chance they were not going to make it back, that they'd be riddled with machine gun bullets themselves. It was difficult. They had to fly. They had to navigate. And I still don't know how my dad got back. I've got a piece of flak that my dad was bending over the bomb site. That thing flew. It would have hit him right here, but he bent down and it flew over his head, went through the seat and hit the pilot in the leg, and the pilot reached down and he said, Charlie, I think this has your name on it. Gave Dad that piece of flak. I have that to this day. But for my dad having bent down just at that precise time, he'd be dead, and I wouldn't be here. And I know that might have been a good thing for some of you, but those were heroes. These people that flew that mission were not heroes. They didn't put their lives in jeopardy. They didn't have to fight against incoming fire. They didn't have any difficulties in terms of guiding the plane, flying the plane. You know what they were. These planes fly themselves. The bombs flew themselves. These people were essentially passengers in a drone, or drones. Not the jet fighters, but the bombers. They were basically passengers in a drone, self-flown. They don't do a damn thing. They're there in case something goes wrong with the computer, which it never does. These things are done by computers they're talking about artificial intelligence. These things take off, they fly themselves, they fly over the target, they release the bombs, they fly back. And they were flying over territory which Donald Trump had already said like 7 days earlier, we own the skies. Of course they owned the skies. First place, they were flying so high that they couldn't be reached by normal artillery anyway, but they had destroyed Iran's ability to defend itself from air attacks. Israel did that. So they knew these planes were flying into a place where they would meet no resistance. Those pilots, all they had to do was get in there and take a nap. They could have sleepwalk through the whole thing. Did their job. give them credit. The real credit goes to the people who developed that amazing technology. And I was a patent lawyer for the Air Force. I know a lot about America, about the Air Force technology, and it's pretty. It was back then. It was amazing stuff. Today, it's really amazing. It's like out of a science fiction movie. But it wasn't the courage of the heroes who flew a dangerous mission. They didn't fly a dangerous mission. They didn't fly a difficult mission. They basically didn't fly the mission at all. They just sat in the plane. Now, the jets that accompanied them, that's a different thing. They were flying. You can't fly these jets. A lot of those are by computer, too, especially the straight flying. But the maneuvering, that's all done by the pilots themselves. But people flying a bomber, that's like people flying these passenger planes. They're great pilots. They're great if all of a sudden something goes wrong and there's bad weather. But generally speaking, they just sit there. Because computers do everything for us nowadays. Yeah, someday they may even be running taxi services in Texas or San Francisco. Yeah. Who was that guy? Elon something. Oh, amazing. It is getting to be a dangerous age. I'm not going to live long enough to see it come to full fruition. But right now, our military is fully engaged in robotics and computers and all of these things, and drones, all of these things being done by electronics. And the days of the heroes are shrinking, and that's a good thing, because I don't want people being heroes going out there and getting killed while they show their heroics and fly dangerous missions like my old man did. So that's just an aside. It's no harm done by calling them that, except I think that when you call those people heroes, it cheapens the sacrifices made by real heroes, particularly those who died and those who were injured. And that's just, to all armed services, we have people who put their life on the line, go into dangerous situations. Those are heroes. People who fly drones from the seat in the plane or from back in New Jersey, I don't consider them heroes. Doesn't mean I don't respect them. I certainly respect their accomplishments. But to me, to say they're heroes cheapens the real heroes. And I knew a lot of real heroes, and I had tremendous respect and admiration for those people. So, enough of that. That's just me, and people are going to say, "Oh, how dare you? You're unpatriotic," and yada yada yada. Well, I'm not unpatriotic. So, but if you want to think that, go ahead. Anyway, that's enough for me yammering, because I got to go back and watch TV to see what's the latest. Maybe we did get all those nuclear reactors. Maybe the Ayatollah's dead. Wouldn't that be nice? I don't know. So much stuff is going on, but the trouble is because Trump, and I have disagreements with friends of mine about this, but the way Trump does things, he keeps people off balance. They don't know. They say he's going to do this, but is he going to do that? And that's how he negotiates. And I'm like, that's the reason he doesn't have credibility. No matter what he says, people trying to fashion their own behavior based upon what they hear from him don't know what to do, and they don't know what to believe. And that's not a good place to be. Remember Honest Abe? Remember George Washington? Those used to be the values that we respected in this country. And some of us still do. Enough of that. Good night and good luck. I got to go find out how much I missed on the news while I was busy, yammering with you guys. Bye.